This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. The City of Winnipeg is working to clear a backlog of infected elm trees, which have to be destroyed. Removing them rapidly is key to preventing further spread of Dutch elm disease. CBC's Josh Crabb shows you why some are concerned so many trees marked for removal last year are still standing.
Contractors with a hydraulic grapple saw remove a large limb from an elm tree in West Broadway. It had to be taken down from the boulevard near John Unger's home because it has Dutch elm disease.
Well, we're going to have some more sunshine in the afternoon on our home. It's a shame to lose the tree.
Infected elms are marked in the summer with a tag and an orange dot. They have to be cut down and destroyed to prevent the spread of the infection. It's transmitted from tree to tree, primarily by the elm bark beetle. Around 6,000 elms have to be destroyed this year, down from an average of 8,000 over the previous 4 years. City Forester Martha Barwinski says Winnipeg is playing catch-up on trees identified in 2022.
We did get behind, and a lot of that has to do with the labor shortage. So labor shortage through private industry and even with ourselves. That's another reason why we're grateful that we have 2,000 less trees to remove this year.
City crews and contractors removed just over 6,000 trees last year. As of this week, about 450 of the roughly 8,000 trees marked for removal in 2022 are still standing. Arborist and Trees Winnipeg President Jerry Engel says leaving them this late into the season may allow the disease to move faster through Winnipeg's elm population.
What's the difference between that and storing elm firewood? So they become habitat for the disease and will increase the number of beetles that are going to transmit that disease.
Barwinski says the city is working with University of Manitoba researchers to identify the hardest hit trees for priority removal, and crews and contractors hired to help with the work are busy cutting all the elms marked for destruction.
We do strive to get those trees removed before the next spring, before the next summer.
She says they have enough resources and are on track to remove trees identified this year and the ones left over from last year by June. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The NDP has fashioned itself as a government that's friendly to Labour. Yet, despite the new government pushing for a negotiated end to the strike at Manitoba Public Insurance, members overwhelmingly rejected the Crown Corporation's latest offer. The CBC's Ian Fraze reports on this latest setback.
Some Manitoba public insurance workers returned to the picket lines, extending a strike that's now 9 weeks old. On Monday, workers voted down the Crown Corporation's latest offer overwhelmingly. A new government has yet to change the outcome of bargaining.
There may be somewhat of a testing period here to see what's possible under the new NDP government, to see if there's room for wage improvements.
During the recent election, NDP leader Wab Canoe made it sound easy.
Heather Stephenson could avert the potential strike at MPI by offering a fair wage to these workers right now.
As Premier designate, Canoe's immediate words to MPI workers were supportive.
I've got your back.
The NDP went on to replace almost the entire MPI board. It ordered the board to get back to the negotiating table and bargain in good faith. They came back with higher wage increases, totaling 12.2% over 4 years. But the offer was rejected.
When you have now the Premier walking your picket lines and telling workers he has their back, members get, and ourselves included, get expectations that they're coming to the table with something, a real good offer, and we haven't seen that.
Labor professor Adam King says the new government deserves some latitude.
At this stage, I don't think that there should be too much disappointment. I mean, historically, there is an alliance, of course, between the NDP and the labor movement. But of course, this is new. The government was just took office, so there's a period of adjustment here.
King says unions have had enough of the high cost of living and the former PC government trying to suppress their wages.
The NDP does have some disgruntled public sector and Crown Corporation employees to deal with now.
The Progressive Conservatives are worried a pricey settlement will drive home higher auto insurance rates. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 41-year-old man was assaulted while picketing this morning.
What's going on, bud? Our guy got attacked.
As Ian Fraze just told us, members of the MGEU were picketing in front of the Manitoba Legislative Building after rejecting an offer from Manitoba Public Insurance last night. Just before 9:30 this morning, police say a man verbally confronted the picketers. The incident escalated. The 41-year-old was assaulted, suffering minor injuries. Other picketers held the suspect until police arrived. A 29-year-old man is now charged with assault. Manitobans will get a break at the pump at the start of the new year. The NDP government is aiming to start a fuel tax holiday January 1st. During the election campaign, now Premier Wab Kinew promised to temporarily suspend the province's 14 cents a litre fuel tax. Finance Minister Adrian Salas says a bill to lift the tax will come before the legislature in the coming weeks and will be in place for a minimum of 6 months.
Well, we know Manitobans are struggling with affordability challenges right now. We know that a lot of working Manitobans are struggling with those increased energy costs for the cost of fuel. So we think it's really important that we give Manitobans a holiday on those fuel taxes.
Now, Salas says the tax could be extended, that break from the tax, based on economic conditions, but he couldn't say exactly what would trigger a tax break extension. A Crown prosecutor cross-examined former fashion mogul Peter Nygard today in a Toronto courtroom. Nygard is on trial for sexual assault. He's accused of attacking women and girls as far back as the 1980s. In response to prosecution questions, Nygard told the court he doesn't remember events from that time. Jamie Strachan has more.
Under cross-examination, Peter Nygard spent much of his time on the stand quibbling with the Crown attorney over small details and questioning the rationale for many of the questions he was asked. He often said he couldn't recall or remember details from years ago. The 82-year-old also, on numerous occasions, told the court he couldn't hear or was confused by questions. "I'm losing my eyesight and hearing. I'm not a very well person," he told the court. Many of the questions focused on an 11-hour interview Nygard gave to Toronto police in 2021, an interview his lawyer advised him against. He testified he gave the interview because he has nothing to hide. Nygard was also asked about the details surrounding the 16-year-old girl who alleges he assaulted her during group sex at his Toronto headquarters in 2005. He told police he didn't recognize her, but added that he recognized the script that's used over and over in almost every one of these statements against me. Previously, Nygard has testified that he does not know and has never met 4 of the 5 women who allege the one-time fashion mogul sexually assaulted them. Nygard was a key player in the fashion industry for decades, with stores across North America. It all came crashing down in 2020 when criminal allegations caused the company to declare bankruptcy. Nygard is expected to be on the stand for at least one more day. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
The Manitoba Lung Association would like to see this province follow Quebec and ban flavored vape cartridges. As of today, the sale of cartridges that are not tobacco flavored is banned in Quebec. Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and the Northwest Territories have already banned their sale. Neil Johnston, the president and CEO of the Manitoba Lung Association, says there needs to be something similar done here because young people are attracted to flavored vapes. Recent surveys found 23.5% of Manitobans aged 15 and older vape. The Canadian average is 17%. A recent episode of CBC's Fifth Estate on Buffy St. Marie calls into question her claims of Indigenous ancestry. In a public statement, the singer calls the Fifth Estate's allegations deeply hurtful. She continues to claim an Indigenous identity, but the evidence presented in the documentary has sent shockwaves across Canada, causing pain, especially among people who are Indigenous. CBC's Emily Brass has more on how Manitoba artists and institutions are responding to the news.
Please welcome a legend in our industry, Buffy St. Marie.
Buffy St. Marie inspired generations of Indigenous musicians.
It's time for change.
In 2018, she won the Juno for Indigenous Music Album of the Year, but a recent CBC investigation suggests she's neither Indigenous nor Canadian.
The Junos are kind of like the benchmark.
Dark secrets, darker light. Singer-songwriter Don Amaro was also up for that Juno for his work with Winnipeg band Indian City. Led by the late Vince Fontaine, the award could have recognized the respected musician before he died last year.
Vince and I used to talk about the awards. They're not the be-all and end-all, but that's the kind of the big pat on the back that says you're kind of in the right direction.
Kelly Fraser was also in the running. The up-and-coming singer took her own life in 2019. Amaro says while he would have liked to see either of those artists win, he's not condemning Buffy.
To get to this place in my career as an Indigenous artist, I stand on the shoulders of giants, and Buffy's one of those giants that kicked open the doors for a person like me.
Ste Marie was recognized with dozens of accolades during her decades-long career, including an honorary doctorate of music from Brandon University. In a statement, BU says it's absorbing the allegations and says it'll engage in meaningful conversations with Indigenous leaders before taking action.
Manitoba Music says the documentary sparked emotional conversations among industry professionals across the country. The group's already looking at how to verify indigeneity for grants and awards, something producer-director Jade Harper says is tricky given the history of the 60s scoop.
We talk about self-identifying as Indigenous people and respecting that and not questioning, because we all don't know what people are going through. So, one of the things I had learned was not to question out of respect.
She says while many are feeling a mix of disappointment and gratitude to Buffy, the honors she received were meant for Indigenous people for a reason.
We need that step up. And so if there are people who are claiming indigeneity who are not Indigenous and are taking those steps, that is harmful.
Harper says any process to confirm indigeneity must involve Indigenous leaders. Emily Brass, CBC News, Winnipeg.
NHL players are thinking about safety this week following the death of a former NHL player. We told you about it last night. Former Pittsburgh Penguin Adam Johnson took a skate to the neck during an English Hockey Association game on Saturday. The incident has renewed calls to make neck guards mandatory. Jets interim head coach Scott Arniel was a forward with the Buffalo Sabres when his teammate, goalie Clint Malarchuk, took a skate blade to the neck in 1989. Arniel spoke on Jets TV.
I was firsthand, and I saw this happen in a game myself, and it's one of the scariest things I've ever seen. And so where it goes next, I know in minor hockey that it's already a rule in junior hockey, so we'll see. I mean, this will be the league. Obviously, the league's probably going to look into this, and they'll make a decision moving forward.
The English Ice Hockey Association says it will make neck guards mandatory starting January 1st. Blake Wheeler skated back into Winnipeg last night to a warm welcome from Jets fans.
Well, we're coming back to a touching tribute for Blake Wheeler. You can see it means a lot to him and his family and friends, a lot of them who are here. So many great moments for Blake Wheeler in this building. He's hearing it from the fans right now. And it means a lot to his family, too. They came along. All three of his kids are here. His wife, Sam, I'm told,
The Jets' former captain playing his first game in Winnipeg in a New York Rangers uniform. Wheeler spent almost 12 years in Winnipeg. He says getting a standing ovation felt great, like he'd made an impact here. He says Winnipeg's and the Jets organization are a huge part of his family's lives and that will continue.
I saw him on an interview this morning, and he said it was going to be really difficult not to pass it to the wrong team because he's just used to seeing those sweaters.
Fair enough. Well, we would have taken that, absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, kids are just heading out now, so sun's going down here, and it's getting darker. So this is a very chilly Halloween.
It is.
Yeah, it sure is. I've got some stats. I did a little bit of digging. Now, this is not complete or anything, but I did go back about 25 years, and yes, indeed, this is the coldest Halloween in at least 25 years. Our high today was minus 5.7. Last time it was below zero on Halloween, at least in Winnipeg, was 2017, and it was warmer than today, minus 1.9. Back in 2003, that was the previous time, 14 years earlier, at minus 1.7. And, you know, the normal high is 4 degrees. So we don't typically have snow on the ground on Halloween. That would be about November 15th. Now, we have had snow in October that has melted before Halloween, certainly, but that snow that stays until March. The normal date for at least this area of the province is November 15th. Last year it was 11, and as I was looking over the last 25 years, I saw some 15s, even a 17 in one of those years. So we've had some pretty warm Halloweens as well. Hope the kids are going to stay warm tonight, and I hope the parents are going to stay warm as well. Minus 7 as the kids head out the door. South winds 22. I was thinking 20 to 30 today, so 22 kilometers per hour. Bit of a breeze. There is some clear sky now right over Winnipeg and just to the north of us. Anywhere you see the clear sky on this satellite image, that's where temperatures will continue to fall by maybe a degree or so an hour, but then kind of hold at about minus 9 overnight. And that is the order of the next couple of days. We see a partly cloudy sky tonight. And then as we head through the day tomorrow, we see some sun, some cloud, few flurries in the morning up on the east side of Lake Winnipeg, and then on into the afternoon, a little bit of that as well in the Barons River area. And we're into some cloud cover again late in the afternoon, and then some clear sky as we head into the overnight, and then back into cloud cover Thursday. On Thursday, we may see a little bit more of this lake effect snow with westerly winds coming across the northern section of Lake Winnipeg. So that certainly is something that's happening this time of year because the lakes aren't frozen yet. And then there's a bit of a clearing trend coming down our way as we head into Friday, but we could also see some snow up around the lake regions once again. So tonight's weather, well, minus 9 is the low. We're already at minus 7, so not very far to go. It'll look like this in the morning. That's also the morning temperature. Not a lot of wind, but then on into the afternoon, we're northwest briefly, 20 to 30 kilometers per hour, and a slight chance of a flurry. I'd say it's 30% or less. And temperatures are pretty similar going through the rest of the week. A better chance of some flurries after increasing cloud early in the day on Saturday and a high of minus 1. So the chillier than normal weather does continue, Janet.
Well, that's the spookiest news of all this Halloween night. Thanks, John.
You bet.
It is Halloween. You may very well have trick-or-treaters knocking on your door right now. But how do you send your child out trick-or-treating if you live in Churchill, where just yesterday morning this presumably hungry polar bear was wandering around town? I spoke to the mayor of Churchill about this afternoon. Michael Spence, thank you for joining us.
Not a problem. Thank you.
So what have you heard about that polar bear roaming around town yesterday?
Well, he walked into town. Thought he'd get a free ride into town. He did. The kids were lining up, waiting for the bus, and the bear comes wandering in, and the kids got a little excited. The conservation was right on the mark, and scooted it out of town.
You say he got a free ride into town? How did that happen?
Well, what I mean by that is that he got a free pass into town. He, let's just say he snuck into town, and that was about 8:30 in the morning. So it was, if he would have came in a half hour earlier, I mean, it would have been dark, and who knows what could have happened. Somebody could have got injured. But yeah, so he was, like I said, the polar bear alert team was prompt, and they moved it out as quick as it came into town.
Now, it's Halloween night as we show this video. So what happens on Halloween night to make sure kids in Churchill can trick-or-treat safely?
You know, it's quite unique. I think the world knows, at least Manitoba knows, that it's different here. Trick-or-treating in Churchill, the polar bear capital of the world. You need to be a lot cautious naturally. You got to be bear smart, and the community does an effective job of doing that. So what'll happen is that The Conservation Pull a Barrel Alert team will meet with the RCMP, the Canadian Rangers, the Fire Department, the EMS crew, Parks Canada, and local volunteers. So what they'll do is they'll scope it out. They'll make arrangements where different folks would be on certain, perimeter of the community, the perimeter of the community. Hudson Bay helicopters they would have done a scout using their helicopter about 2 o'clock this afternoon. So just checking it out, making sure that there's no bears in the area. And then they would do a further scout at about 3:30 this afternoon. They would have done a second one. So it's all hands on deck so that our trick-or-treaters can do it safely.
How much of a buzz did that make about town that there was a bear right there?
With social media, it's quick. Not only does the community know, but the world knows really, really quick. So it naturally, it's we Churchillians, once the word is out, we make sure that our neighbors and everybody else is aware of, an incident like that. So word travels quick.
Mayor Mike Spence, thanks for your time. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you folks as well.
Dozens of people in a refugee camp are the latest casualties as the Israeli military moves deeper into Gaza. We'll bring you the latest after the break. The Israeli military continues to move deeper into Gaza. As its ground offensive carries on, so too do its air assaults. Some of the latest casualties in this conflict are dozens of people in a refugee camp. Susan Ormiston brings us more now from Jerusalem, but first a warning. Some of the images in this report will be disturbing for viewers.
A frantic dig for a boy. If he survives, he'll carry the mental and physical scars of this war. A block of apartments hit hard in the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. At the edge of a gaping crater, people gathered in shock, helpless to stop this war or escape its lethal force. More than 50 people were killed, says the hospital's director, hundreds more injured. There are injured everywhere, says Dr. Shoaib Idis. All the volunteers went down hand in hand just to help people. Israel says its troops and tanks are pushing closer to Gaza City, advancing from the north and east, ultimately to isolate the territory's largest city from the south. But Israel's national security advisor said northern Gaza is just the beginning. The south's turn will come. The IDF says it's targeting a vast web of tunnels, Hamas's underground paths for resistance. Hamas's military wing released its own video Tuesday showing fighters maneuvering on foot through the sand near Gaza's border, firing at advancing Israeli soldiers, and an alleged overview of Israeli armor inside the territory. And if to prove that after 25 days of bombardment, it can still launch rockets, Ashdod was hit, near Gaza, sowing some fear in Israel. No one expects a short war. The World Health Organization is predicting an imminent catastrophe in Gaza. Bread lines getting longer, 6-hour waits, and fresh water is scarce.
It was very hard.
But that's not the worst, says Palestinian-Canadian Shouk Al-Najjar.
Finding water and food, it's not a concern for us as much as staying alive.
In Khan Yunis, she's staying with 150 family and friends jammed into 3 apartments.
After more than three weeks being stuck in this nightmare, I completely lost hope. I even lost hope in humanity. I don't understand how this is still happening. I don't know if we're going to survive this.
She is on a list with other Canadian nationals desperate to get out of Gaza, but so far there's no sign of a safe exit anywhere. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Desperately needed aid for Gaza remains stuck on the Egyptian side of the Rafah crossing. Some is getting through, but aid groups say it's not nearly enough to meet demand. Egypt organized a tour to the Rafah border, and CBC was the only Canadian crew that took part. As Tom Perry reports, frustrations there are running high.
We're at the Rafah gate just outside Gaza. We're on the Egyptian side here, and the Egyptian Prime Minister, Mustafa Madbouli, just spoke to a big crowd of people here, his supporters, large police presence, and 3 or 5 busloads of journalists brought in, local people, international media, all here to listen to the Prime Minister's message. Now, he had a few messages today. One was about aid. There is, down this roadway, a long line of aid trucks waiting to get into Gaza. The message from the Prime Minister is that aid has to get through. Humanitarian groups say a trickle of aid has been getting in, but really the people of Gaza need so much more. Now, the Prime Minister and government officials, they blame the Israelis for not allowing that aid to go through. They're saying that the inspections that the Israelis require really makes the process very, very slow. The other message we heard from the Prime Minister, he stopped earlier in the day at a military camp and he gave a speech there. We're in North Sinai right now. North Sinai is where Israel, Egypt, and the Gaza Strip all come together. And the message from the Prime Minister is that Sinai is Egyptian. He's rejecting any idea, any proposal, any thought that Israel would somehow force people living in Gaza, Palestinians living in Gaza, to move over to this side, to the Sinai. For the Egyptians, they say that's just not on. Now, the other thing, the other issue in play at this crossing, aid is supposed to get in here expatriates, including Canadians, are supposed to be able to get out. That hasn't happened yet. And so we've got Canadians and other nationalities trying to get to safety. They haven't been able to do that. And the question remains, when will that happen? When will Canadians and others, civilians, be able to get out of Gaza, come home to safety? Tom Perry, CBC News, at the Rafah crossing near Gaza.
Here in Canada, the Trudeau government's facing a major backlash over its tax on carbon emissions. Last week, the Prime Minister announced a 3-year moratorium on the tax for home heating oil. But only 3% of households in this country rely on oil to heat their homes in the winter. The rest of us also deserve a tax break, say Trudeau's critics. Marina von Stackelberg has more.
Mr. Speaker, those in favour of the motion, 52. Those opposed, 0.
Saskatchewan's legislative members voting unanimously to stop collecting the carbon tax if Ottawa doesn't make an exemption for all home heating. The temperature being turned up after the federal government announced last week it would temporarily exempt homes from the carbon tax if they heat with oil, a move that mostly benefits households in Atlantic Canada.
The fact is, the vast majority, 95% of people in Ontario, do not heat their homes or businesses with oil. It's completely unfair that they still have to pay the carbon tax, so I'm urging the Prime Minister to play fair, do what's right, and eliminate the tax altogether.
The Prime Minister says no other exemptions are coming.
There will absolutely not be any other carve-outs or suspensions of the price on pollution. This is designed to phase out home heating oil the way we made a decision to phase out coal.
The Liberals say Canadians who heat with oil are often lower income and in rural locations without energy alternatives. So the temporary exemptions and rebates to switch to electric heat helps them get off that fuel.
But he's actually tearing our national unity apart.
But Conservatives accuse the Liberals of dividing the country.
Why don't we let Canadians decide? Why doesn't the Prime Minister pause the tax across the country until Canadians go to the polls so we can have a carbon tax election and Canadians can choose his plan to quadruple the tax or my plan to axe the tax?
After 3 failed elections in a row by the Conservatives, they still want to fight another election on denying climate change, on denying the costs of climate change.
And as one of the largest producers of fossil fuels, one minister says cutting Canada's pollution and not hurting pocketbooks is bound to be difficult.
This is the biggest single challenge, I would argue, that is confronting this country right now. It is going to go on for a long time. It will be tough and it will be messy and it will be hard. And this is just one of many, many days like this.
More days surely to come as provincial and territorial premiers are set to meet in Halifax next week. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Many civil servants say they've been struggling to get benefits since Canada Life took over their health care coverage in the summer. The change affects almost 2 million workers, retirees, and dependents, and they're beyond frustrated. Matthew Kupfer has more.
What do we want? Services! When do we want them? Now!
A rally in downtown Ottawa with civil servants calling for what they're owed by the employer. In this case, their health benefits is almost a familiar sight. Federal workers also took to the street to demand their pay during the Phoenix pay system debacle. The parallel isn't lost on the leadership of the largest union representing federal workers.
They can't pay their employees properly, and now they've completely buggered up their benefits. That is just totally unacceptable.
The Public Service Alliance of Canada wanted a 24/7 call center for health plan members to ease the transition. They say current staffing and hours have been limited, leading to long wait times as people try to understand why their claims have been denied by Canada Life. Aside from applying public pressure in the streets, there's little the unions can do.
We're stuck. We are stuck just like everybody else.
The changes to the benefits plan and the contract to administer it are outside of the collective bargaining process.
This is the employer's problem to fix. Of course, if there are things that we can escalate, we will. But we don't have any levers or mechanisms to make Canada Life, meet its obligation. The employer holds the contract with Canada Life. They have the service standards.
Last week, Treasury Board President Anita Anand said she's in regular communication with the company's leadership.
I actually have been pressing Canada Life to ensure
that the situation is going to improve. For example, they did add more staff to the call centers to address the volume that they were seeing.
Public Services and Procurement Canada says the $500 million contract was awarded to Canada Life after an open, fair, and transparent process. The contract includes a 6-month adaptation period, along with the opportunity to make required changes. The department says the company's service levels are being monitored. For its part, Canada Life says it's prioritizing claims for those experiencing financial hardship or who have urgent needs. As well, it's established a team to review denied claims for those who'd previously been granted exemptions. Matthew Kupfer, CBC News, Ottawa.
King Charles and his wife Camilla are on a 4-day visit to Kenya. This is his first visit to a Commonwealth country since becoming the monarch. The king says he plans to acknowledge, quote, the more painful aspects of the past between Britain and Kenya, and to understand the wrongs suffered by the people of the African country, unquote. But Kenya's Human Rights Commission wants the king to go further and offer a full, unconditional apology for what it describes as colonial abuses. During Kenya's quest for independence in the 1950s, British soldiers forced about 1.5 million Kenyans into detention centers, where many of them suffered torture and other forms of abuse. So, have you put your winter tires on yet? Coming up, we'll hear from an expert about why those seasonal treads are so important. The story's coming up after the break. With wintry weather showing up a bit earlier this year, many vehicle owners are looking at their winter tires on the shelves of stores and asking themselves, should I or shouldn't I? According to experts, the answer is you should, and here's why.
I strongly recommend winter tires. These are your lifeline. Tires are what keep you connected to the road. When you turn, you want to turn. When you stop, you want to stop. If your tire's not doing that for you, your next step is a crash. So the winter tires will be specifically designed to wick away moisture, and you see how a lot of these grooves are cut kind of at an angle and curved out. So that's going to help wick away the moisture and allow the water to be pushed away. The other side of it is you have all these little cuts and these little sipes in there. Those are designed kind of as when you push on it, each one will kind of bend over and give you a little extra traction. There's signs that you want to look at when you're looking at a tire and determining if it's usable or not. So the first thing is, if you look right around the edge around here, right around the seam around there, and sometimes in the edge right where the writing is, you want to look for that rubber being worn out, and you want to look for any weather cracks. If you have any cracking on your sidewall or anything like that, the rubber is just no good anymore. It's worn out, you don't want it any longer. Typically, most manufacturers say once a tire is 10 years old, the rubber compound just isn't very good anymore. This one in this little block says 0313. The first two numbers there, 03, that's the third week. And then the 13 is for 2013. So this tire was built in the third week of 2013. So this tire is more than 10 years old. I would not consider putting it on a vehicle. This one has a listing on the side of the tire of a mud and snow tire. So you will see M/S for mud and snow tire. Mud and snow tires are generally considered an all-season tire, where that mountain skate with a little snowflake, that's what gets you to be a winter tire. For somebody who's new to the country, perhaps never seen snow, I would 100% strongly push winter tires. Because if you haven't driven in this type of weather before, it's a real eye-opener. I would do the same for a young driver. So if you have somebody 16, 17 years old, maybe have their learners, a good thing to get them in the habit of understanding the importance of winter tires and how much more traction they will give you.
Do you agree?
Yes, I do. And you know, a lot of people think they have an all-wheel drive vehicle, don't need the winter tires. Have you ever tried it? It's like the traction is so good, and the braking distance is shorter too. So
it really does make a difference.
It really does make a difference. And
tomorrow's going to be milder.
Milder, still not seasonal. Pretty hard to get back to seasonal when we've got this cover of snow on the ground. But let's look around the country, because a week ago or so, we were talking about 20 centimeters in Calgary, and Edmonton was getting snow. Now look at the temperatures there. We've got an upper ridge. These are the warmer colors you're seeing west of Saskatchewan. So -2 right now in Regina, but above 0 in western parts of Saskatchewan. 6 is in Calgary and Edmonton, 10 in Vancouver right now, 11 in Victoria, and then -7 in Winnipeg. That's where the cooler air is diving down into North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and then we have some snow happening these days out into the Maritimes. It is wet snow at temperatures near or above the freezing mark. Nice little clear patch here, but it's kind of giving us cooler weather for the kids heading out for Halloween, I guess. As the sun is down, the kids are out now, but -7 at the airport, -6 downtown. Right now, -9 in Steinbach and in Morris. As we look out to the southwest, temperatures really cooling off around Brandon, Melita, Morden, Winkler, all well below seasonal, well below what they should be for this time of year and this time of day at this time of year. And surprisingly milder across most of northern Manitoba. So It's warmer now in Churchill than it is in Winnipeg. Churchill at -5, Thompson at -3. Conditions for tonight, we still have a few flurries floating around in a few places, but really not much accumulating snow. Might see a little bit of a flurry or two around Red Lake. The overnight low -8. That would be tomorrow morning. There's our overnight low in Winnipeg at -9, and almost at that -10 in Steinbach, currently at -9 degrees. Out to the west, we're looking at lows with generally cloudy skies or partly cloudy skies overnight, but a low of -11 in Brandon and in Morden. And to the north, we've got occasional flurries up the western edge of the province, right up into the Lynn Lake area. Flurries and windy conditions in Churchill. And tomorrow, it'll be a blowing snow that'll be happening around Churchill at -7. So winds still gusting to about 60. But again, a lot of these numbers across the north, especially in the western section of the province here, will be warmer than or similar to what we'll see in the south. A -1 in Brandon, above 0 for Swan River, Dauphin, and Portage. May see the roads that were icy earlier today, the highways, melting down a little bit, getting a little bit better traction. We have a slight chance of a flurry in Winnipeg. Falling temperatures in Barons River. You start the day at 0, you end up about -2 in the afternoon, and a chance of flurries in parts of northwestern Ontario as well. I'll be back with a very Halloween-looking 7-day forecast shortly.
Thank you, John. Every day, spin doctors try to control information to benefit someone. That's the idea behind Cecil Rosner's new book called Manipulating the Message: How Powerful Forces Shape the News. Coming up, I speak with the former managing editor of CBC Manitoba. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. In the 30 years since I began my career as a journalist, countless things in the news business have changed dramatically. Some of those things are fantastic, like how easily you can find information on the internet. But some, however, are not, like how much of that information you might find online can't be trusted. Cecil Rosner is an investigative journalist and our former managing editor here at CBC Manitoba. He's written a new book called Manipulating the Message: How Powerful Forces Shape the News. It launches this Thursday evening at McNally Robinson Grant Park. Cecil, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Janet.
One of the big differences I think of when I think back is how easily we used to be able to reach sources, to reach people, government ministers, officials. You could just phone them directly. Now you can't. Officials of companies or government bodies are protected behind layers and layers of staff. How has the growth of public relations as a profession impacted journalists?
No, I think you're very right on that. One of the pertinent statistics that I came across in researching this book, it shows the huge increase in the number of public relations and communications people in Canada over the years. At the same time, the number of journalists and reporters and journalists is declining in Canada. So today you have about 14 people in public relations and communications for every reporter in Canada. So what it means is that the average reporter has less and less time to sit and verify and figure out the truth of statements, whereas there are far more people trying to insulate institutions and government departments and whoever their clients are and present them in the best possible light. And of course, it's not in their interests always to present all of the information. Sometimes key information is omitted, but if reporters don't have sufficient time to do that kind of verification, I think ultimately it's the public that suffers.
Okay, so there's massaging of the message, certainly by public relation professionals, but do we have evidence of things just being out and out wrong that are presented by these PR professionals?
Lots. Well, let's talk about PR professionals and their clients. In my book, I present case after case after case of statements that have appeared in the media that turned out not to be correct. Not through specifically the fault of the reporters, but it's because that's the messaging that they've received. It could be a scientific study touting some new miracle drug. It could be a public opinion poll that didn't have a proper sample size. It could be a study that hasn't been properly peer reviewed. But information flows into newsrooms every day. Politicians are making promises every day. Think tanks are putting out reports every day. And it's up to journalists to figure out what is the truth of those statements and to subject all of that information to critical thinking and verification. And because of what's happened in journalism over the years, a lot of the ad revenues that newspapers and broadcast outlets depended on has disappeared. There have been layoffs. There have been fewer and fewer outlets employing as many journalists as they did in the past, and the remaining journalists have to feed more and more platforms and 24-hour news cycles, and it means the average reporter is very busy and often not able to thoroughly investigate every message that comes through a newsroom.
So what is your key message for people who consume information? What do they need to do to protect themselves?
I think, well, there's two things. I think there's things the public can do, the consumers of news can do, and I think there are things that the media can do. In terms of the media, I think more attention has to be paid to things like fact-checking, things like investigative journalism, things like diving deeply into statements that are being made to figure out what is true and what is not true. From the point of view of the public, I think there are tools that the public can arm themselves to do some of that work on their own as well. It starts with critical thinking. It starts with reading something in the media or on your social media feed and asking, what's the source of this information? Is there a conflict of interest in the person presenting me this information? Is this picture I'm looking at in my social media feed authentic? When was it taken? There are tools out there that allow the public to do that kind of work. So I think it's a joint responsibility, both on the part of the media and on the part of consumers of media, to try to do a better job of getting closer to that truth.
Cecil Rosner, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Janet.
John Saunders back with your 7-day forecast, and then we're going to bring you a daily lift to make you smile and head you off into the night. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News.
Here is a look at your 7-day forecast. A little bit warmer the next couple of days. Could see a flurry or two tomorrow. -2 on Thursday, 0 on Friday, and then we're looking at -1 on Saturday. We'll see clouds roll in early and a good chance of afternoon flurries, and then again a little bit cooler on into next week. Yeah, it'll be a lot cooler. What's happening? Janet, where's my body? What happened? Your body's gone too.
How can that be?
We're like floating heads. Must be a Halloween thing. Hey, speaking of Halloween, look at the decorations on that house behind us.
They
It's
did a
pretty
nice
good.
job. Oh, look, if you, yeah, you can see my, So I won't do that anymore. Let's go look at the house in Boston. Here's your day. This beautiful house was done in tribute to Taylor Swift, and it's got Swifties from all over the country coming to see this amazing place covered in gold because that reminds them of the album Reputation. Look at that. There's headstones for each of her exes, including her current one, the NFL player Travis Kelce. I don't know how he feels about that. So it's nothing like planning an elaborate Halloween gag for your news friends and then having things literally fall apart at the end.
I'm feeling a little disjointed.
Are you?
Yeah,
Disjointed? I'm feeling disembodied. Ow!
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Oh, this fence hurts, man. Be careful out there. Watch for kids if you're driving. See you tomorrow.